My name is Khaled al-Masri. I am 32 years old and was born in Raqqa in the heart of Syria, a city that, for as long as I can remember, has never known peace. The streets that must once have been full of life and laughter have become silent, scarred by bombings and marked by the constant sound of gunfire and explosions. I grew up watching buildings crumble like sandcastles, feeling the ground shake and fear becoming a common, almost banal feeling. It was in this desolate setting that I began to understand what the world was, a place made of pain, struggle, and survival. My father was a man of unshakable faith. For him, serving Allah was not something that could be done simply through prayers or good deeds. True service, the purest and most honorable, came through armed struggle, jihad. From an early age, he told me that this was the greatest calling, the most sacred of duties. And as a child, I believed every word. The way he spoke, with his eyes full of conviction, made it seem as if heaven only opened to those who fought and died for him. In our house, his words were law, and to question them was to question God's will. The city we lived in was not just our home. It was a battlefield, a land where every corner carried stories of combat, loss, and blood. I grew up seeing armed men walk down our street as if they were heroes. Those images became part of my identity. The sound of helicopters, sirens, screams, all of these have become as common as the sunrise. Each battle left its mark, not only on the walls and floor, but on me. Little by little, I was molding myself into someone who saw meaning in war, someone who believed that living and dying for a divine cause was the only true way to exist. My father spoke of heaven with an almost palpable certainty. He described it in vivid detail: rivers of milk and honey flowing endlessly, verdant gardens where there was no pain, only infinite bliss. He said that the martyr was received there with honors that no human being could imagine. The first drop of blood, he said, washed away all sins. He quoted the promises of Scripture in a voice choked with emotion: forgiveness, rewards, marriage to 72 virgins, the chance to intercede for 70 family members. All these were offered to the one who gave his life on the battlefield. Those words, though sweet on the surface, were poison in disguise. They were seeds planted deep in my heart, silently germinating, transforming my faith into a weapon. I didn't know there could be another way. I was never taught to question. I was trained to accept. And so, from a very young age, I embraced that worldview as the only one possible. Live for God, die for God, kill for God. The walls of my house were covered with portraits of martyrs, men who, my father believed, had achieved the highest degree of honor. And in every black flag waving in the destroyed streets, I saw a symbol of glory, of unshakable faith. The idea of holy war was not something distant. It was part of everyday life. I was told that those who joined the sacred struggle received blessings that no one outside it could ever understand. And I, wanting to please my father, wanting to find purpose, joined ISIS. I remember exactly the day I swore loyalty to the cause. He felt like he was finally fulfilling the destiny he was born to have. Adrenaline pulsed through his veins. I was young, full of vigor, and convinced that I was chosen by Allah. During the first few training sessions, every drop of sweat was like a seal of divine approval. We learned to fight, to plan, to kill, and each teaching was accompanied by religious verses, as if faith and violence went hand in hand. The scary thing is that, for a while, it all made sense to me. I truly believed that we were the executors of God's will. Every bullet fired, every life taken, was treated as an act of faith. We were told that the blood of infidels was a sacred offering, that to destroy was to purify, that we were cleaning the world. But there was something else, something I only realized over time. ISIS ideology was like an invisible chain, tightening little by little without us noticing. It was a doctrine designed to stifle any doubt, any trace of humanity. Killing stopped being a burden and became a virtue. Empathy, regret, fear, all of these were dismissed as weakness. And the more I immersed myself in this universe, the more I lost myself. The lines between right and wrong blurred. Fanaticism disguised itself as devotion. And I, already so immersed, would only later begin to realize how much I had been deceived, manipulated, and how much I would still have to pay for all of this. Our interpretation of Islam was a rock, heavy, uncompromising, and sharp as a blade. There was no room for nuance, for doubt, for humanity. It was with this hardened view that I received my first mission after training. I was filled with fervor, filled with a sense of belonging. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was part of something greater, something that went beyond my existence. I was not just a soldier. I believed I was an instrument of divine will. The destination was a small village south of Raqqa. The leadership told us that infidels, traitors to the faith, people who dared to practice Islam in a wrong, corrupt way, lived there. Our order was simple: purify. Cleanse the place of any trace that was not aligned with our faith. Destroy everything that was different and everyone who resisted. The attack happened at dawn. The sky was still painted a deep blue, punctuated by a few stars, as if the universe were watching in silence. We invaded the houses in a line, shouting verses from the Quran, and then chaos ensued. Screams running, the dry sound of gunshots, the bang of broken doors. I remember the smell of gunpowder and dust mixed with the desperate cries of people. I saw men trying to protect their families, women holding onto their children, children running aimlessly. My hand shook at first, but I pulled the trigger. Again and again. No distinction. We were not there to understand, only to eliminate. And in that moment, I did what I believed was right. I believed I was clearing the path to paradise, that every life taken was a sacred offering. But when the last scream died away, and the village fell into a deathly silence, something shifted inside me. The stillness felt wrong, as if the world had held its breath. I walked among the bodies, slipping in blood, trying not to stare too long at any one face, but eyes were everywhere, most of them still open, staring at some point in space as if asking, why? There, in that field of death, I felt something move inside me. It wasn't regret. Not yet. It was more like a stone in my stomach, a dull discomfort, which I tried to silence with the verses they taught me. It was necessary, my thought said. It was for the cause. In the days that followed, I did what I always did. I buried my doubts, suffocating them with justifications. I convinced myself again that this was necessary, that the world needed to be purified. But the faces of the victims, especially the children, wouldn't leave my mind. They began to appear everywhere, in the reflection of the water, in my dreams, even on the faces of living people. I saw their frightened looks, their open mouths begging for mercy. I heard their screams even in the silence. It was on another mission, weeks later, that the crack became a fissure. We were sent to another village, even smaller, almost forgotten among the mountains. We were given similar orders: leave no survivors. When we entered the place, I saw a woman clutching her small son. She was kneeling, trembling, her eyes glued to mine. For a second, everything stopped. I saw fear, pure and raw, but also something else: humanity. And for the first time, I hesitated. That split second seemed to last forever. But the commander's voice rent the air behind me, harsh, demanding that I do my duty. I fired. The sound of the gunshot seemed louder than normal, and when the woman fell with the boy still in her arms, everything inside me shattered. I couldn't believe it anymore. I couldn't hide it anymore. This wasn't justice. This wasn't religion. This was murder. This was evil. I stood there, covered in blood, listening to the echo of the shot disappear into the mountains. The silence after the attack was different now. It didn't bring me pride or a sense of accomplishment. It crushed me. From that moment on, something inside me began to unravel. I began to wonder if I really knew Allah. Did God want this? Did He really delight in blood? In the despair of mothers? In the terror in the eyes of children? The questions came like an avalanche, and for the first time I let them get to me. I was no longer sure of anything. Was I serving God, or just feeding a machine of violence that used His name as a disguise? I kept fighting. On the outside, I still obeyed. I still wore the uniform. But on the inside, I was a broken man, cracked to the core. I carried the weight of everyone I had killed. And worse, I believed there was no going back. I was made of war. I was a product of pain. My identity had been forged in my blood, and I no longer knew who I was or if there would ever be an escape. I reached a point where I no longer recognized who I was. I looked at my own hands, covered in blood, and wondered how I had gotten there. The face in the mirror no longer belonged to me. It was that of someone hardened, empty inside. And yet I continued that life, not because I wanted to, but because I saw no other way out. Violence was my only language. Pain, my only shelter. Until one day, in the middle of yet another mission, everything changed. And it changed in a way I never imagined. We were in the field, an operation considered simple but in a risk area. It was like so many others. I no longer felt fear, just an automatic coldness, almost like a machine. But then came the explosion. A mortar landed so close I didn't even have time to think. I just saw a white light, heard a high-pitched sound, and then silence. My body was thrown with force. I felt my bones crack, my skin tear. The blood started flowing before I even understood where I was hurt. I fell to the ground hard, and in that instant, I knew I was dying. The pain was unbearable, but with it came a strange calm, as if finally, everything was about to end. The world around me began to spin, my vision blurred. The sky seemed to darken too quickly, and as life slipped away from me, I felt a presence in the air, a chill in my soul. My heart began to slow. Death didn't come as a sharp cut. It came as a slow plunge into something deep and dark. I heard whispers I don't know where, maybe from my mind, maybe from somewhere else. I felt like I was being pulled out of my own body, and in that moment I realized I was crossing a border. Suddenly, everything around me disappeared. The smoke, the gunshots, the screams. Only darkness remained. A different darkness, suffocating, that surrounded me on all sides. It was like being submerged in a thick, bottomless, airless sea. I could no longer feel my body, but I felt something stronger. Fear. A fear that grew inside me like poison. And with the fear came other things too. Guilt, regret, despair. Everything I had pushed away now came back like a hurricane inside my soul. The first thing that struck me about that place was the sound. Screams. Sorry. Deep, desperate cries, as if all the pain in the world were gathered there. I tried to move, but I couldn't. It was as if invisible chains held me captive. The air was thick, hot, and each breath seemed to burn my lungs. And then, I understood. I wasn't unconscious. I wasn't in a dream. I was in a real and terrible place. I was in hell. This was not the symbolic hell of religious parables. It was real, and everything I had been taught as a child now took shape before me. The stories from the Quran about eternal punishment, apostates, sinners. Here the words were no longer metaphors. The flames burned but did not consume. People screamed but did not die. It was like a prison for the soul, where the pain was endless and hope was non-existent. I saw figures contorted in pain, their faces twisted, their eyes wide open, trapped in endless cycles of suffering. Some screamed, others just moaned as if they no longer had any strength. The despair was palpable. The pain was raw. It seemed as if those souls were being torn apart inside and out, and yet they remained alive, eternally burning. And then I began to see familiar faces. First, there were my old comrades, jihadists who had died with me, men who believed they were doing the will of Allah. Then came other faces, much harder to look at. I saw the eyes of victims, people I had killed, innocents, children, women, men who were just trying to live. They were there, looking at me. Some were screaming, others just staring at me as if their souls were asking, why? I tried to speak, to ask for forgiveness, to beg for help, but my voice wouldn't come out. My throat was dry, as if it were made of ash. I tried to run, but there was no ground. I tried to run, but there was no way out. The truth wrapped around me like a knife spinning inside me. That was the price. This was the cost of the life I had led. The destination that was promised to me as paradise was, in fact, a place of suffering, forged by lies and used as a trap. The flames surrounded me. The silence between the screams was even more terrifying. And in that abyss of pain and remorse, I could only think of one thing. Was there still salvation? Could Allah hear me there, in that place where not even time existed anymore? I don't know how long I stayed there. Maybe minutes, maybe centuries. Everything is distorted in that place. But I remember the moment I woke up, back in my body, painful, bloody, alive. I don't know if it was a death rave, a divine warning, or a glimpse of what awaited me. I only know that I came back different, because after seeing hell with my own eyes, I could never lie to myself again. Their screams, everyone's screams. The sounds mingled together in a chorus of pain so deep, it seemed to pierce my skin and my heart. It was as if each voice dragged me a little deeper into that abyss. Hell wasn't just fire. It was memory. It was guilt. It was the suffocating weight of everything I had done, the lives I had taken, the eyes I had watched fade, the screams I had caused. They now surrounded me like living echoes, and they seemed to scream for justice. My chest felt like it was about to collapse. I could barely breathe. Every memory, every death I had caused, was like a stone piled on top of me. Was this my destiny? To be eternally devoured by guilt, by flames, by this despair? Was this the end that awaited me forever? It was then that, far away, deep in the darkness, I saw something. A light, dim at first, a barely visible spark. But slowly it grew stronger, hotter. It wasn't like the fire that burned around me. It wasn't a heat that destroyed, but a heat that comforted. It was different. And even before I understood what it was, something inside me knew. It didn't come from this place. The light drew closer, and with it came a presence. Not like the twisted presences that inhabited that hell, but something pure. I couldn't look directly at it. There was a figure within the light, standing tall, radiating something my mind couldn't explain. I felt, for the first time in a long, long time, peace. A true peace. One that didn't come from denial or pride, but that simply was. Even in that place of torment, the chaos seemed to fall silent before him. He came closer, and the closer he got, the more the weight around me seemed to lift. It was as if the pain itself receded. The darkness inside me trembled before his light. When the voice came, it was a whisper, both soft and firm at the same time, a voice that called my name like no one else had ever done before. Khaled. That froze me. How did he know my name? How could that figure be there, in this place where only condemnation existed? But the answer was in his eyes filled with sadness and compassion. There was no judgment, no anger. He looked at me like someone who knew everything about me, every step, every mistake, every wound. And yet, he was still there. "You have been deceived," he said, his voice echoing straight into my soul. "They used my name to justify violence. They used faith to spread death. You believed them. You fought for a lie and you lost. My legs gave out. I knelt down, my face burning with shame." His words cut through all the lies I had told myself. This was the truth. Everything in me screamed, yes, I was fooled. And now, look where I am. But you are not yet beyond redemption. That sentence hit me like a wave. I looked up, not understanding. How? After everything? How could someone like me be saved? How could he speak to me with love after everything I had done? I saw every tear. I saw every face. I saw every time your heart wavered. I know what you did, but I also know why you did it. Khaled, I died for you. Hearing that, there, was like feeling the air return to your lungs after being submerged for a long time. He reached out his hand, and when he touched mine, his touch was like a wave of warmth and life. A heat that didn't burn, it healed. "If you turn to me, I will forgive you," he said, his eyes full of tenderness. "Your sins are many, but my love is greater." And in that moment something blossomed inside me. Fragile, shy, but real. Hope. "I showed you the way, Khaled, but the choice is yours," he continued. "You can remain in the darkness, trapped in violence, hatred, pain, or you can choose the light, peace, love, life." My entire soul trembled, because in that moment I understood. Redemption was not a prize. It was an invitation I never thought I would receive. And now it was there, in front of me, waiting for my answer. When Jesus spoke those words of forgiveness, it was as if something inside me finally broke, not in pain, but in release. My soul, which had been chained by the weight of guilt for so long, opened like a flower that after years of being in the storm, finally felt the touch of sunlight. It was more than relief. It was rebirth. I felt forgiveness like a river of clean water washing over every part of me, washing away not only the pain I remembered, but even the pain I had buried so deep I no longer knew it existed. Regret was still there, but not as an anchor. Now it was like a bridge, and in place of guilt, something I had never experienced before sprouted. Peace. A peace so intense, so alive, that it seemed to have a personality of its own. The love I felt was not just an emotion, it was a presence. A real, tangible presence that enveloped me like an eternal embrace. And then Jesus reached out again, not as a judge, but as a friend, as a brother. I took his hand without thinking twice. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew with all my being that following him was the only possible choice. The darkness around me began to recede, like mist escaping the morning sun. The pain, the heaviness, the suffocation, everything dissolved as that light enveloped me. It was no ordinary light, it was alive, so pure, so bright, that my eyes could barely bear it at first. But even then, it didn't hurt. It healed. As we were led out of that place, the environment changed completely. The air, previously dense and heavy like smoke, was now light, sweet, full of life. It was like breathing for the first time. With each step, something inside me came back to life, and when the light opened completely, I saw the garden. It was a place that human words could never describe fairly. The ground was covered in green grass so vivid it seemed to sing, flowers of colors I had never seen before, colors that perhaps did not even exist in our world, danced gently in the breeze. The air smelled of life, a sweet, pure, almost childlike perfume. The rivers that flowed through the garden shone with a silvery light, and the sound of the flowing water was like a lullaby to the soul. It was more than beautiful. It was perfect. Jesus walked beside me, and I could see in him the silent joy of seeing a child return home. He looked at me tenderly and said, "This is the true paradise, Khaled. Not the one promised amidst war and bloodshed, but this one, where peace, love, and the living presence of God reign. Here the heart finds rest. Here, there is no pain, no fear, no death." His words struck a chord deep within me. All that talk I'd been taught about paradise, about carnal rewards, about honor for killing, now seemed like a pale, small, empty lie. To be was true paradise, a place of healing, of reconciliation, of eternal hope, and above all, of unconditional love. As we walked through that garden, I saw other people walking by. They weren't strangers. They were scarred faces like mine, people who had once been lost too. I saw something in their eyes that I recognized immediately. Regret turned to gratitude. They were redeemed souls, people who had once known pain, violence, darkness, and who, like me, had been redeemed by grace. They smiled at me, not with judgment, but with understanding. It was as if to say, "We know. We've been there too, and now we're home." In that moment, I understood. It wasn't just a place. It was a state of being, a return to who we were created to be, a home that had always been there, waiting for us. Heaven wasn't a prize for perfection. It was a gift to those who accepted that we're not perfect, but who decided to surrender themselves to the truth, to the love of Christ. And there, in the middle of that garden where time no longer existed, I understood that my story had not ended. In fact, it was just beginning. But now they were whole in the light of God's love. There was no condemnation, no shame there. There were no accusing eyes, no reminders of failure. There was just acceptance, an acceptance so complete, so absolute that I could hardly believe it. In heaven, no one was rejected. No one was forgotten or unwanted. Everyone had a place. Everyone was welcome. Jesus stopped under the shade of a majestic tree, with a strong trunk and leaves that shone like emeralds in the sun. The fruits hung like little golden suns, pulsating with life. He reached out, delicately picked one of them, and handed it to me. "This is the fruit of life, Khaled," he said tenderly. I picked up the fruit with trembling hands. He felt alive, warm, vibrant, as if he had a beating heart. And when I took the first bite, it was like the entire sky had poured into me, an indescribable flavor, sweeter than honey, purer than water. But it wasn't just the taste. That's what came with it. A deep, overwhelming joy, as if all the deficiencies, all the wounds in my soul were being healed, filled, restored, all at once. Peace, love, belonging, what I had been searching for my entire life, what I thought I would find in war, in the cause, in sacrifice. It was there, in the simplicity of a bite, and in the presence of the one who walked beside me. Jesus looked at me with compassion, and for the first time I understood, really understood, that he was never there to condemn me. He did not come to point the finger at my wounds, but to heal them. "Khaled," he said in a soft voice but firm as the earth, "you have been deceived, but you are not beyond redemption." These words echoed within me like a distant bell that finally reaches the ears of a traveler lost in the forest. "I died for you," continued, "for all the sinners, for all those who have lost their way. You are not beyond my grace." And in that moment, I cried. I cried like I had never cried before, not out of despair, but out of relief. The tears didn't come from pain. They came from the hope that was beginning to blossom within me. The weight of my sins, the guilt that had been suffocating me for years, all of that began to evaporate, slowly, like mist, before the sun. "If you turn to me," he said, As he took my hand with gentleness and warmth, I will forgive him. His sins are many, but my love is greater. His words pierced me like a blade, but not to hurt, to set me free. For the first time in my entire existence, I felt something I had never felt before: hope. Jesus looked me in the eyes, and his voice sounded again, soft as a breeze over still waters. I have shown you the way, Khaled, but the choice is yours. You can remain in the darkness, trapped in pain, in hate, in revenge, or you can walk in the light, the path of peace, of love, of life. And I knew. In that instant, I knew with a clarity that no doctrine had ever given me, that no battle cry had ever revealed to me. There was no other way. I had seen hell before. I had walked through it, and now I was offered a way out, a chance, a new life, a second chance. I held on tightly to his hand, and as we walked, the darkness that had once enveloped me disappeared, like smoke blown by the wind, and as the light enveloped me, I felt my body light, my soul free, my spirit reborn. The air was different now. There was no more heaviness in my chest, no more darkness in my thoughts. Everything around me pulsed with life, the real life. Jesus walked beside me with calm, serene steps, and everything around me blossomed with his presence. The pain of the past seemed like a distant shadow, the guilt, a forgotten burden. This was the promise that no jihad, no ideology, no false prophet could ever fulfill. Real redemption, true love, eternal peace. And there, in the garden of grace, I knew, and finally, that I had returned home. I no longer felt the pain I had felt. The gnawing guilt that had defined me for so long now dissolved like mist in the sun. For the first time, my heart felt light. There was no more heaviness, no more regret. Just peace, a deep peace, like the silence that comes after a lifelong storm. It was then that my eyes were opened to a place I had never imagined existed. Before me stretched a garden so alive, so incredibly vibrant, that no earthly memory could compare. The flowers seemed made of light. Their colors were not just hues, they were emotions. Each petal conveyed beauty, joy, and fulfillment. The air was sweet, filled with the fresh scent of creation, and the soft sound of the wind playing through the leaves sounded like music. Streams of pure water meandered through the valley, their waters sparkling like glass under a sun that did not burn, but warmed the soul. Every detail of the place seemed to have been designed by the Creator himself, with infinite love and care. It was as if everything there, the air, the trees, the light, breathed the very essence of God. I walked alongside Jesus through that garden. He didn't say anything for a few moments. He just walked beside me as if he knew that I needed to feel all of that first without rushing. And even without words, his presence spoke louder than 1,000 sermons. With him there was no more fear. There was no more pain. It was as if every stain on my soul was being washed away as I breathed that new air. "This is eternal rest," he said finally, his voice as soft as it was firm. "But it's not just one place, Khaled. It's a state of being. Here, there is no more war. There are no more screams, no more tears. Only what should have always existed remains: love, joy, and peace." I was silent, trying to comprehend the depth of it, because I had believed in a paradise before, but it was a paradise of violence, built on lies. What I saw now, what I felt in every cell of my being, was true. This was the real paradise, the place where broken hearts are mended, where the broken is mended, and where the lost is found again. As we walked, I noticed other people there. Their faces were not unfamiliar. They were souls who had also carried scars, difficult stories, pains like mine. But now they were shining. Their eyes were full of gratitude, their smiles light, free. They had known the same forgiveness that reached me. And there was no distinction, no exclusion. Everyone was welcome. Everyone had a place. Jesus stopped beside a tree unlike anything I had ever seen. Its branches were heavy with fruits that shone as if they had been carved by the light itself. "This is the fruit of life, Khaled," he said, handing one to me. I took it with my hands still shaking, as if holding something sacred. As soon as I bit into it, a wave of joy so intense ran through me that I felt tears fall without warning. But they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of someone who was tasting for the first time what it was like to be truly accepted, completely loved. Jesus looked at me with tenderness, and in that look was all the truth. "You no longer have to live in the shadows of what you did," he said. "You no longer have to carry the burden of guilt. You have been forgiven, Khaled. And now, there is a purpose for you." I froze. A purpose? After everything I've done? After the lives I've taken, the lies I've believed, the evil I've served? You have a mission, he continued. I have freed you for something greater. The world is still in darkness. There are many who are where you have been, lost, deceived. They need to hear. They need to know that there is redemption, that there is a path to true peace. I stood there, feeling those words sink deep inside me. It wasn't just a calling. It was a rebuilding, a new chance, a sacred responsibility. Go, Khaled. Speak of my love. Show the way to forgiveness. You are no longer the man you once were. Now you are light where there was once darkness. And so, with my heart made new, my soul restored, I began to understand. I had been saved not just from damnation, but saved for something. I had been plucked from hell to become a living witness to grace. And by that grace, I would live, no longer as a warrior of hate, but as a messenger of love. I was no longer the terrorist, not the murderer, not the monster I had become by believing lies. That old Khaled was dead, not by a bullet or an explosion, but by the truth that had finally reached me. I was someone new. I was a new creation, and most of all, I had been redeemed. It wasn't easy to accept this at first. It was almost impossible to imagine that someone with so much blood on his hands could be forgiven. But the love that touched me didn't come from men. It came from a Savior who saw what I could be, not just what I had been. Now I had a purpose, no longer to destroy, but to restore, no longer to instill fear, but to spread the hope that had saved me. I knew what hell was, not as a metaphor, but as a reality. And now, knowing the truth, I needed to be a voice for those still trapped in that same dark abyss. As my eyes roamed the peaceful expanse of the sky that had been shown to me, a certainty dawned on me. This was the truth I had always sought, the home my soul had silently longed for all my life. Peace did not come through the rifle I had carried, nor through the blood I had shed. It came through the unconditional love of Christ, pure, deep, eternal. This was true paradise. This was the way to salvation. And there, in the light and scent of eternity, I knew I would spend the rest of my life shouting this truth to the world. No matter the cost, no matter the threats or the rejection, I would carry this message, because in the end, it was the only truth that really mattered. When I opened my eyes, the light from the sky was no longer there. The calm had been replaced by a sterile, cold, and almost hostile environment. I was back, lying in a hospital bed. The sound of machines monitoring my heartbeat was constant, interspersed with the faint hum of voices in the hallway. The strong smell of antiseptic made me sick. For a moment I thought it had all been a dream, a hallucination caused by pain and blood loss. But something inside me said no, this was not just a vision. That was real, more real than any battle I've ever faced. He was alive. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the bandages, my aching ribs, the constant throbbing in my injured joints. But my mind was clear like never before. The questions that haunted me for so long. Am I really doing God's will? Am I a righteous man? Finally, they had an answer. And it didn't come from a book or a leader, but from the love of Christ himself. In that cold bed, another truth hit me hard. I had changed, yes, but my past still existed. He did not disappear with the light of heaven. The memories of the screams, the explosions, the eyes begging me for mercy, it was all still there. I had been forgiven, but I still carried the scars of my old life, physically, spiritually, psychologically, and I knew with every fiber of my being that staying in Syria was not an option. I was a target now, a traitor to my former brothers in arms. Those who had called me comrade would now hunt me as an enemy. Abandoning the jihad was unforgivable, and in their code, that was punishable by death. Returning to Raqqa would be suicide. The city that had once welcomed me was now a death trap. I knew the fate of deserters. I had seen with my own eyes what they did to those who dared to leave. They did not forgive. They did not forget. And they certainly knew about my desertion. Fear paralyzed me, but not for myself. It was for those who might suffer if I hesitated. So the decision wasn't really a choice. It was a necessity. I needed to escape. Escape from Syria. Escape from the past. Escape from the ghosts of war. And seek a new beginning in a place where the light that touched me could flourish, not be crushed. Lebanon appeared as the only possible way out. A nearby country with borders still permeable and a little more freedom. It wasn't a promise of comfort. but it was a chance. And for someone like me, a chance was everything. Under the cover of darkness, with a heavy heart and silent steps, I left everything behind. The weapons, the uniforms, the oaths. I left Syria, my land, my prison, my battlefield. I crossed the border like a ghost, disappearing into the night. Behind me were the ruins of my old life and the faces of those who once called me brother. But ahead there was hope. I arrived in Lebanon with nothing but the clothes I was wearing and the crushing burden of guilt weighing down on my chest. I had fled Syria, fled certain death, but I quickly realized that I had not left my past behind. It haunted me like a shadow, whispering betrayal around every corner of that strange country. They would find me. I knew it deep in my soul. It would not be easy to erase the life I had left behind, because those with whom I had once shared violence would see me as nothing more than a traitor, a coward who had abandoned the cause, and therefore deserving of death. I tried to suppress my fear, but it echoed like a whistle in the silent nights. They would come for me for sure. How could I face them, now that I had given up on all that? Was I destined to die for my new faith? Amid the doubts that threatened to consume me, I reached for that memory of heaven, the deep peace I had felt, the unconditional love that had filled my soul. There was no going back. The man I had been, the terrorist, the murderer, the perpetrator of violence, was buried in the past. I had been reborn. In Lebanon, I met Christians who welcomed me with kindness and patience. They taught me step by step the true meaning of Jesus' love and grace. Little by little, I began to realize how far I had fallen from the truth I had been searching for. Christianity was not a set of empty rituals, nor was it a disguised war. It was peace. It was redemption of the soul, a call to bring that redemption to others who, like me, were lost. Jesus' words echoed within me now with force, very different from the radical and blind faith I had followed before. I understood that the peace they promised in the struggle had never existed, only violence and pain. Now I saw that true peace came from forgiveness, from an open heart. In a small Coptic church surrounded by the diverse faces of people from all walks of life and backgrounds, I found a place to sit and breathe. The priest welcomed me with eyes full of understanding, a compassion that made me feel accepted for the first time in a long time. I shared my story with him, telling him everything, the battles, the deaths, the destruction I had caused in the name of a false cause. I spoke of the hell I had known, my encounter with Jesus, and the gift of a second chance. The priest smiled tenderly, and in a soft voice that seemed to penetrate my soul, he said, "Chul, no matter what you have done, Jesus offers forgiveness." That sentence fell upon me like a balm, relieving some of the weight I was carrying. I knew what I had to do, renounce my past and abandon forever that ideology that had nearly destroyed me. That same day, I was baptized. The cold water that washed over me not only cleansed my body, but also all the darkness that had consumed me for so long. I felt the old Khaled, the terrorist, the murderer, the man of violence, sink into the depths, giving way to someone new, a man who had known God's grace and was ready to follow a different path. The future was uncertain, and I had no idea what it would bring. But I knew one thing for sure: I could no longer remain silent. With renewed faith in my heart, I began to tell my story to anyone who would listen, especially those who, like me, had been deceived and had lost their way. Ex-combatants, extremists, souls trapped in lies. I wanted to show them that there was another way, a way of love, forgiveness, and true salvation, found only in Jesus. I shared with them what had been revealed to me, the terrible hell that awaits those who choose violence as their path. But I also spoke of the light, peace, and love that heaven offers. It was not an easy path. The danger was real and constant. The men who had once seen me as a hero now saw me as a traitor. The threats began to arrive almost immediately after my baptism. My former comrades would never accept my abandoning the cause. They would never forgive me for my desertion. Yet, despite the dangers that were piling up around me, I felt the love of Christ pulsing within me, giving me the strength and courage to carry on. I had found a new purpose, no longer to spread hatred or violence, but to guide those who were still trapped in that dark cycle out of the darkness. I wanted to show them that there was a different way, a way of peace that Jesus offers with an open heart. I continued to speak wherever I could, in hidden churches, among refugee camps, in secret and whispered meetings, far from the watchful eyes that wanted to silence me. My words reached others who, like me, had been deceived, men and women scarred by wars and false doctrines. Many listened attentively, Some, touched by the love I conveyed, came to Christ, finding the peace they had always sought. But the danger never went away. I knew my life was at stake every day. Still, the love that had reached me was greater than the fear that tried to paralyze me. Jesus had given me a new life, and I would dedicate it completely to spreading his message of forgiveness and redemption. I wore a simple cross around my neck. No jewelry, just a symbol that represented everything I had left behind and everything I had found. For me, that cross was no longer a sign of death or suffering, but the mark of the new life that Christ gave me. I was ready to pay any price for this mission. My heart, once hardened by years of violence and hatred, now pulsed with new strength, becoming an instrument for something greater than myself. I had been reborn, and I knew my calling was to bring that same hope to others, no matter the cost. The refugee camps in Lebanon became my first mission field. There, amid the ruins of lives ravaged by war, I began to tell my story. I spoke of the hell I had known, of the torment that those who choose violence carry forever. But I did not dwell on the pain alone. I spoke of redemption, of the infinite love of Jesus, of the mercy that reached out to me, and of the true peace I found in him. My story wasn't just words. I was living proof of the transformation Christ offers. The man who once took lives was now giving life, sharing hope with the lost. Soon I began leading small Bible studies at camps, quiet gatherings in hidden corners, where people hungry for truth could hear about healing love. In the eyes of those listening, I saw the same weariness, the same doubt that plagued me when I began. But as I spoke, something else began to shine. A faint spark of hope. Hope that so many had lost, crushed by the pain and violence of their stories. Many came from war-torn lands where hatred seemed to be the only law. Some had fought the same battles I had. Others had fallen victim to the same ideology that I had once blindly embraced. But there, in that little haven, as they heard about Christ's love, forgiveness, and new life, their hearts began to open. A timid light was beginning to dawn where before there had been only darkness. I could feel with profound clarity that the truth was beginning to take firm root in the lives of these people. The cross I wore around my neck was not just any accessory. It was a living symbol of the transformation that the power of God's grace had wrought within me. It was not just a simple piece of jewelry, but a silent testimony of the light that now burned in my heart and was reflected in my every word and action. Little by little, I began to understand the true meaning of the gospel, a message of love, hope, and rebirth. But even as I experienced the immense joy of seeing others come to Christ, the shadow of danger never left me. The threats continued to come, relentless. Those I had once called brothers, my former comrades in arms, had not forgotten. To them, I was a traitor, someone who had abandoned the cause for which we had fought with such fury and conviction. They used every means possible to send me warnings, clear messages that I must be silenced forever. I knew they would come after me. Many nights I lay awake, enveloped in darkness, listening to the distant sounds of gunfire and gunshots and wondering if that would be the last night I would see. But surprisingly, even in those moments of tension and fear, something new inhabited my heart, a deep and unshakable peace. Fear no longer dominated me as it had before. I had gone through the hell of my soul, and now the love of Christ filled all the voids that had previously been filled with pain and guilt. I knew that no matter what happened, I was not alone. Jesus had shown me the way, and as long as I lived, I would continue to be a living testimony of that grace. In the underground churches, I found a new family, people who had been through the same internal and external wars, who had fought similar battles, and who, like me, had been transformed by the healing power of Christ. In these secret gatherings, hidden from the authorities and the extremists who sought to destroy us, we found strength in each other. We prayed together, shared our stories, our pains, and our victories. There, amid the silence and constant surveillance, our bond of faith and hope held us together. At one such meeting, before a group of ex-combatants, men who, like me, had been deceived by the lies of extremism, I realized an even greater truth. My mission was not just about my own salvation. It was about bringing the light of truth to those who were still trapped in the shadows I had been in. My voice choked with emotion. I told them, I was lost. I was deceived. But I have found the truth. I paused, looking each of them in the eye, trying to convey the sincerity and weight of that revelation. Jesus showed me the way, and I'm here to tell you that you can be free too. As I spoke, I saw tears well up in some of their eyes. I saw the struggle reflected on their faces, the same internal battle I had faced when I began to question everything I believed in. But I also saw something else, the spark of hope. The light of redemption was beginning to shine in their tired eyes. And in that moment I knew with certainty that my mission was just beginning. Despite the imminent dangers, the threats that surrounded me, I would move forward. I continued to speak out whenever I could, in hidden churches, in refugee camps, in secret meetings with veterans and people lost in the darkness of hate. My story became a beacon, a flame of hope for those still trapped in the lies of extremism. Some had found peace in Christ, others were still fighting their own battles, but I knew I had done my part. I had shared the love that saved me, and I would do so until my last breath. Adjusting to my new life was not easy. The memories of the war, the violence, the relentless brutality still haunted me like shadows that refused to go away. There were nights when I would wake up in the middle of my sleep, drenched in sweat, haunted by the desperate screams, the innocent faces I had seen destroyed, the scenes of devastation in which I myself had been involved. These memories cut deep, like sharp knives, into my soul. But over time, as I surrendered more and more to the love of Christ, these images began to lose their power over me. The darkness gave way to a growing light, and the pain that had once gripped me gave way to an unexpected calm. Something inside me shifted. An almost palpable sense of calling began to grow, a call to live for something greater than myself, to transform pain into purpose. I understood then that my life would no longer be just an escape from the dark past. My mission was different, to share the redemption and peace I had found, to tell the world about the love that saved me. This love could not be kept to myself. It needed to be spread. That's how I heard about the Christian Missionary Society, a group dedicated to taking the gospel to the darkest places, where people lived trapped in fear, hatred, and pain, never having heard the true message of peace and hope. They didn't just preach, they lived the love of Christ, restoring lives and bringing light to broken hearts. I knew in that moment that this was the path I needed to follow. It wasn't just about talking about Jesus, but about showing with every gesture that no matter how deep the abyss someone has fallen into, redemption is possible. I knew this darkness firsthand, what it was like to be deceived by lies, consumed by hatred and violence. I had walked this path of extremism and terror, but I had also experienced God's transforming grace, and I wanted others to be able to find that same truth. The Missionary Society welcomed me with open arms. They recognized my story, my transformation, and my passion. They trained me in evangelism, teaching me how to connect with people of all backgrounds and stories. I began traveling with them, speaking to those who were still trapped in the darkness I knew so well, those deceived by fear, hatred, and violence. I remember one day in particular, in a crowded market on a small Pacific island. The air was thick with the noise of negotiations, the babble of voices in dozens of languages, and the strong smell of spices and unfamiliar foods. In the midst of the chaos, an unexpected peace settled within my heart. It was there that I saw a man sitting alone in a corner stall with a blank stare, lost somewhere deep inside himself. He looked like a man who had already carried a lifetime of pain and loss. His expression reminded me of my own reflection, that lost and directionless Khaled that I once was, searching for something, not knowing where to find it. I approached him hesitantly, my heart heavy, but determined to speak. "Excuse me, sir," I began, my voice firm but thick with emotion. "I want to share something with you. I know exactly what it's like to be lost, trapped in the darkness, but I also know that there is hope. There is a way to peace. His name is Jesus, and he loves you." The man looked at me, his eyes filled with skepticism but also with a faint gleam of curiosity. I could see the weight he carried, the same burden I had carried for so long, the guilt, the pain, the fear. "You don't understand," he said, his voice heavy. "I've done things, terrible things. I don't deserve forgiveness." I smiled softly, understanding deeply what he was feeling. "I understand more than you think," I said, my heart filled with compassion. "I was once a man like you, lost in hatred and violence. But then I found Jesus and he gave me a second chance. He can give you a second chance too." The man remained silent for a moment, as if digesting each word. His gaze, previously closed and hard, softened. For the first time I noticed a faint glimmer of hope emerging in his eyes. I continued to speak of the love of Christ, of the sacrifice Jesus made for him, and how forgiveness does not depend on what he did, but on the power of divine love. I shared my own testimony, the painful journey I had walked, the hell I had experienced, and the redemption I had found by surrendering myself to Jesus. When our conversation ended, the man had tears in his eyes. He wanted to believe, but he felt the weight of his past was too heavy to carry, so I reached out and placed my hand gently on his shoulder. Jesus is not here to condemn you. He is here to set you free. All you have to do is trust him. As we prayed together, I felt God's presence in a way I had never felt before, a deep, genuine peace filling the moment. I knew then that this was my calling, not just to save myself, but to be a light in the lives of those still trapped in darkness. Since then, I have traveled with the Christian Missionary Society, moving from place to place, sharing my story and the gospel with those still trapped in the lies I once believed, on crowded streets, in hidden villages, in refugee camps. Everywhere I went, I saw the same sadness reflected in the eyes of the people I met, but he also saw something else, the real possibility of redemption. Years passed and I continued on this journey, sharing the love of Christ with men and women of all backgrounds. Some, like me, were combatants, others, victims of violence. Many lived in fear or never knew true peace, but the message I brought was always the same. Jesus loves you. You are never too lost. He is calling you home. The fear of death no longer haunted me. I knew I was living for something greater than myself, living for Christ, and that was enough. I may have been born in a land scarred by war, raised in the shadow of extremism, but today I am a man of peace, a man with a mission. I have been given a second chance, and now I share that chance with anyone who will listen. Brothers and sisters, Jesus loves you.